I'm reading The Christian Life and Character of the Civil Institutions of the United States by Benjamin Franklin Morris. I think this book was written in 1830. It goes over a bunch of stuff. It says developed in the official and historical annals of the Republic by B.F. Morris. Benjamin Franklin Morris. True religion affords a government its surest support. Washington. The highest glory of the American Revolution was this: it connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government with the principles of Christianity. John Quincy Adams. The religion of the New Testament, that religion which is founded on the teachings of Jesus Christ and his apostles, is as sure a guide to duty in politics and legislation as in any concern of life. Daniel Webster. Righteousness exalted a nation. The Bible. In this volume is committed to the American people in the firm assurance that the invaluable facts which it records will be grateful to every patriotic and pious heart. In it, as from the richest mines has been brought out the pure gold of our history. Its treasures have been gathered and placed in the casket for the instruction and benefit of the present and future. We have a noble historic life, for our ancestors were the worthies of the world. We have a noble nation, full of the evidences of the molding presence of Christian truth, and of the power and goodness of divine wisdom in rearing up a Christian republic for all time. That this was the spirit and aim of the early founders of our institutions, the facts in this volume fully testify. The field through which the reader will walk in this work must give wider expansion to his political views, quicken the pulses of his loyalty, add to his conscience dignity as an American citizen, strengthen his confidence in our future, and impart a higher tone to his piety. The single subject of the compiler was to link in a connected form the golden chain of our Christian history, and to reveal the basis on which our institutions stand. The documents and facts are authentic and have been collected with laborious diligence from standard historical works and from the political and Christian annals of the nation. The volume is the voice of the best and wisest men of the Republic. It must therefore have weight with the American people and be a political and Christian thesaurus and textbook to the scholar, the teacher, the patriot, the politician, the statesman, the jurist, the legislator, the divine, and in a word, to all classes of American citizens. The work is not speculative or theoretical, but a series of facts to unfold and establish the Christian life and character of the civil institutions of the United States, in the light of which every American citizen can trace to its source the true glory of the nation and learn to appreciate its institutions and to venerate and imitate the great and good men who founded them. It has been a delightful task of patriotism and piety to the compiler to prepare the volume and to lay it as a grateful offering upon the common altar of his country and of Christianity. The work has been the labor of years performed in various states of the Union and in the capital of the nation, within sight of the tomb of Washington, during the most eventful year of the rebellion, and its last pages were prepared for this press in Philadelphia, where so many of the sacred senses of the Revolution transpired. The volume, therefore, has in its preparation a national feature, and the reader will be impressed with the importance and oppositeness of the facts to the present time. It is also the ardent hope of the compiler that the facts and principles recorded in this volume, and which in our early struggle, all denominations of Christians uttered with such harmony their convictions that the only sure and stable basis of our civil institutions was in the Christian religion, may contribute to strengthen the union of patriotism and piety in all parts of the country, to save the nation from the perils of a wicked rebellion, and be the brightest hope of the future. Care has been taken to give each author credit for his thoughts and language, though in a few instances it may have been overlooked. It was not the desire nor the design of the compiler to elaborate his own views, though they are found in the volume, but to give those of the great leading minds of the Republic, both past and present, his grateful acknowledgments are tendered to the librarians of the Young Men's Mercantile Liberty, like Mercantile Library Association, and of the Mechanics Institute Libraries of Cincinnati, of the State Library of Ohio, of the Historical and Astor Libraries of New York, of the Mercantile Library and Library Association of Philadelphia, of the Libraries of Congress and of the Interior Department, to the Chief Clerk in the Department of State, for access to the manuscripts papers of Washington, to Peter Force of Washington City, frequent examinations of his large and invaluable collection of books and periodicals, illustrative of the early history of our country, and to the Honorable Thomas Corwin and of Ohio. And yeah, it says that the volume is committed to the blessing of God and to the judgment in favor of the American people in humble trust that it may aid in preserving and perpetuating to future generations the union of states, the integrity of the best government ever instituted by the wisdom of man, and the nationality of the American Republic. Principal authorities consulted. This gives you a list of all these things and the contents. It gives you an introduction by Reverend Byron Sunderland. It's chapter 1. It's about sources of proof to establish the Christian life and character of the civil institutions of the United States. Chapter 2 is the hand of God in the settlement of the American continent. Chapter 3, Puritan settlement, its Christian motives and scenes. Chapter 4, civil government instituted in the Mayflower on a Christian basis. Chapter 5, Christian colonization of the New England colonies. Chapter 6, Christian systems of education in the New England colonies. Chapter 7, Christian colonization of Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware. Chapter 8, Christian colonization of Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. Chapter 9, Statesmen of the Revolution, their views of Christianity and its relations to civil society and government. Chapter 10, Christian legislation of the Continental Congress. Chapter 11, states constitutions during the Revolution, Christian doctrines incorporated in them as fundamental law. Chapter 12, the Federal Constitution, a Christian instrument. And in Chapter 13, Christian scenes in the First Congress under the Constitution. Chapter 14, the Christian acts and scenes of the Army of the Revolution. Chapter 15, Government chaplains. Chapter 16, Christian ministers of the Revolution. Chapter 17, Christian women of the Revolution. Chapter 18, Christian churches of the Revolution, congregational churches. Chapter 19, Christian churches of the Revolution, the Baptist churches, Methodist, Episcopal churches. Chapter 20, Christian churches of the Revolution, the Reformed Dutch Church and other churches, German Lutheran Church, Universalist Convention. Chapter 21, Christian character of Washington. Chapter 22, Fast and Thanksgiving days. Chapter 23, Thanksgiving days appointed by the states. Chapter 24, Christian scenes in the capital of the Republic. Chapter 25, Christianity of American courts and Christian character of eminent American judges. Chapter 26, the Christian element in the Civil War of the United States. It gives you the introduction to the story of Christianity in America is one of the most astonishing chapters in the annals of the world. The events of providence in reserving and preparing the country of these United States to be the theater of its development and triumph constitute one of the most remarkable passages of modern history. This is a Christian nation, first in name, and secondly because of the many and mighty elements of a pure Christianity which has given its character and shaped its destiny from the beginning. It is preeminently the land of the Bible, of the Christian Church, and of the Christian Sabbath. It is the land of great and extensive and oft-repeating revivals of a spiritual religion, the land of a free conscience and of a free speech, and the land of noble charities and of manifold and earnest efforts for the elevation and welfare of the human race. The chief security and glory of the United States of America has been and now and will be forever the prevalence and domination of the Christian faith. The materialists may find in other aspects of our country many grounds of complacency compared with other nations. We have had a wonderful career The marvels of the Republic stand thick along the line of our advancement, whether we consider the colonial period, or that of the Revolution, or those of subsequent times. Our growth in numbers and territory and wealth and power has been almost unparalleled. The spirit of our government and its institutions is singularly adapted to secure the general peace and happiness of human society. Our example has long been an object of jealousy and fear to the oppressors of man. Our country has thrown open an asylum to the unfortunate from every quarter of the globe. All the kindreds of the earth have been welcome to repose beneath the shadow of our tree, which in less than a single century has spread its branches across the continent. And if our civil polity has not realized all the possible blessings of a free government, the reason lies less in the genius of the economy than in the acknowledgement and perfections of human nature itself. In addition to these things, Providence has signally favored the nation in geographical position, the fertility of its soil, the plenty of its seasons, and the salubrity of its climate. The vigor of the people has found ample scope in utilizing the physical resources of the country. By all the industries and the arts of agriculture, manufacture, and commerce, while in conducting the educational and intellectual interests of society, no modern nation in the same space of the time has contributed more to the great elements of that higher civilizations towards which the world is everywhere slowly but surely tending. These are sources of just satisfaction to every friend and lover of his country, but they are meanwhile considerations which fall far below those great moral and spiritual principles, in the absence of which no state on earth can perpetuate its existence. The true theory of national life and prosperity is clearly unfolded in the revealed Word of God. The secret of all stability and enduring greatness in human governments, as with individual man, is to be found alone in the quickening power of the Christian faith. This only imbuing and pervading the mind and heart of human society can organize and preserve to the body politic its highest and most untroubled fortunes. Fallibility and corruption inhere indeed in the materials of every commonwealth, the result of which is a liability to continual change, growth succeeded by decay, and decay forcing another growth, is the philosophy of national vicissitude, as it is also the great fact of the physical creation. Quote, one generation passeth away and another generation cometh, end quote. And therefore the permanence of empire must rest in the ideas of a people. If then there be in such ideas no great enduring principle of spiritual life, there can be no perpetuity of national existence. If there be no grand, sublime, and imperishable thought, filling the soul of a people with its fire and fashioning their progress after its pattern, there can be no sense in which they may escape the inevitable mutations of the world, or avoid the fate of so many that have gone before them. The most powerful empires of the past have perished because they were wanting in principle, strong enough and spiritual enough to resist the self-destructive energies of human nature. Sorry, I had to get back and stop. The pagan world could not furnish such a principle. It was in neither their philosophy nor their religion. It is not in the power of man, unaided, to discover and apply such a principle. Nothing short of divine wisdom and power can actualize among the nations that principle of spiritual life which not only originates but preserves the substance of social and civil welfare. Christianity is the divine method of imparting this principle to men and nations, and that the only method revealed from heaven for regulating our present state, and after this conferring upon us Christianity from a system of perfect and saving truth. Its duties comprise the sum of all genuine While its ascendancy over the human soul is effectually secured by the regeneration of no less than the infinite Spirit of God, the dispensation of the Spirit has been distinctly and constantly affirmed in our country, and the people have been instructed to expect, quote, the times of refreshing from the presence of the Lord, end quote, not more in the early and latter reigns of heaven than is the silent but reformatory processes of our moral and religious condition. The author of human nature is that same God who must resupply its wasting energy and diffuse in human society the diffuse in human society the life and light of truth by turning men from the way of transgression onto, quote, the wisdom of the just, end quote. According to this belief, there is a direct and immediate connection between the human soul and the divine spirit, and wherever the sacred influence falls, there human beings are sure to, quote, walk in newness of life, end quote, supporting and stimulating all that is precious and invaluable in the temporal and eternal well-being of mankind. This doctrine, which lies equally removed from the superstition of ignorance and from the levity of unbelief, has been more thoroughly explained and more widely disseminated among the people of America than anywhere else on the face of the earth, and it is due to the influence of evangelical religion among all classes of society, more than to all other considerations together, that our prosperity has been so great and our progress so unexampled. Quote, ye are the light of the world, ye are the salt of the earth, end quote. This is the description of men whose views and conduct are the result of the inspiration of Jesus Christ. Our time attests its truth. Quote, righteousness exalted a nation, while sin is a reproach to any people, end quote, and must, if persisted in, pave the way to their final destruction. This divine maxim has been exemplified in all the old seats of human population and in born award. In the spirit of prophetic admonition, from age to age, the voice of history is lifted and repeated accents of solemn warning, and rolls and thunder blasts its own great lesson upon the ear of nations. Apologize, no, like, finally over. Where was I? Let me see. This is chapter 1, Christian life and character. Civil institutions of the United States. As a Christian origin and character statement of the source of proof of the fact, Christianity, the pervading element, object of the founders of the Republic, symbols of civil government, Christian constitution and state papers, the revolution inspired by religion, Christian annals of the Republic, Christian faith of the men who formed our civil institutions, duty of American citizens to study the Christian origin and genius of their civil institutions. And so, says the history and genius of the civil institutions of the United States must ever be a subject of profound thought and interest to the American citizen. Their establishment and progress to completed forms of government and their influence and fruits upon 30 millions of people and on the nations of the earth constitute a new era in the science of civil government and the progress of human liberty, and commend them to the reverent study of the statesman, the patriot, the Christian, and the citizen. The institutions of the North American Republic have their birth and baptism from the free inspirations and genius of the Christian religion. The fact has given to the state its political power and moral glory, and shed new light on the benign nature and adaptation of the Christian system to secure the highest political prosperity to a nation. Quote, Christianity is the principal and all-pervading element, the deepest and most solid foundation of all of our civil institutions. It is the religion of the people, the national religion, but we have neither an established church nor an established religion. An established church implies a connection between church and state, and the possession of civil and political as well as the ecclesiastical and spiritual power by the former. Neither exists in this country, for the people have wisely judged that religion, as a general rule, is safer in their hands than in those of rulers. In the United States, there is no toleration for all enjoy equality and religious freedom, not as a privilege granted, but as a right secured by the fundamental law of our social compact. Liberty of conscience, freedom of worship are not chartered immunities, but rights and duties founded on the constitutional republication of reason and revelation, end quote. The theory and faith of the founders of the civil and political institutions of the United States practically carried out these statements. They had no state church or state religion, but they constituted the Christian religion, the underlying foundation and the girding and guiding element of their systems of civil, political, and social institutions. This proposition will be confirmed by the following summary of historic facts, which have an extended record in the various chapters of this volume. First, the Christian inspirations and purpose of the founders and fathers of the Republic. It was a popular legend of the ancients, which gave to their laws, literature, and religion a sacred solemnity and power, that the founders of empires received immediate inspiration from the gods, and that their systems of government came from the responses of the deities who presided in their temples of religion. This myth, in a Christian sense, was a grand and glorious fact, with the wise and skillful workmen who, under God, created and completed the civil institutions of the United States. No claim to special inspiration from heaven is set up for the fathers of our republic. It would, however, be a violence to historic truth not to affirm and admit that they were under the special and constant guidance of an overruling providence. The Bible is a divine charter of their political rights, as well as of their hopes of immortality. They reverently studied, and on it laid the cornerstone of all their compacts and institutions. The Mosaic system of political jurisprudence, which, quote, contains more consummate wisdom and common sense than all the legislators and political writers of the ancient nations, end quote. The founders of the American Republic thoroughly understood and incorporated its free spirit and democratic principles into their organic institutions. Secondly, the Christian men who formed our civil institutions were trained and prepared for their work in scenes of conflict in which the truest ideas of liberty and religion were developed. Great ideas and forward movement of the ages have received their inspiration and impetus from civil and religious agitations and revolutions. This fact has its historical analogy in the conflicts that preceded the planting of a Christian republic on the North American continent. The whole of the 16th century was a period of active preparation for future times, and all that is great in modern science may be said to have received its foundation in the agitations that grow out of that period of the world. It forms one of the grandest and richest eras in human history, end quote. Whilst it was an age replete with the most splendid triumphs in science and literature, it was preeminent also for its elaboration and vindication of the fundamental principles of civil and religious liberty. The persecutions of the Puritans in England for nonconformity and the religious agitations and conflicts in Germany by Luther, in Geneva by Calvin, and in Scotland by Knox, were the preparatory ordeals for qualifying Christian men for the work of establishing the civil institutions on the American continent. God sifted, end quote, quote, God sifted, end quote, in these conflicts, quote, a whole nation, that he might send choice grain over into this wilderness, end quote. And the blood and persecution of martyrs became the seat of both the church and the state. It was in these schools of fiery trial that the founders of the American Republic were educated and prepared for their grand Christian mission, and in which their faith and characters became strong and earnest with Christian truth. They were trained in stormy times in order to prepare them to elaborate and establish the fundamental principles of civil and religious liberty and of just systems of civil government. Brewater and Winthrop and Roger Williams and Penn and George Calvert and Oglethorpe and Otis and Adams and Jefferson and Washington, with their illustrious co-laborers, could trace their true political parentage to Pym and Hampden and Wycliffe and Milton and Cromwell, and to the ages in which they vindicated the principles of liberty and sealed many of them their faith by martyrdom. Thirdly, thus inspired and prepared the Christian men of Puritan times and of the Revolution presented and developed the true symbol of civil government, a nation in the embodied form and spirit of its institutions, and the symbol of someone leading idea. This rules its civil administration, directs its social crystallization, and forms its political, martial, and moral character. The Hebrew Commonwealth was a symbol of a theocratic government. Its rituals of religion and liberty maintained the form and diffused the spirit of freedom and of a true republican government. Its nationality, growing out of peculiar and local causes, at their ages of historical grandeur, passed away. It was the first and last type of a national theocratic republic. The Roman Empire, in its colossal unity and form, was the symbol of law and the stately grandeur of a strong government, of the reign of military rule and conquest. Its fabled origin and the mythical communion of its founder, Numa, with the divinities, gave a rigid religious cast to its civil and military institutions and transactions. The science of Roman jurisprudence educated the citizens of the empire in the cardinal virtues of loyalty and patriotism. Religion is a Roman word signifying obligation to the government. A Roman citizen could no more be disloyal to his country than to the gods. This conviction gave to the government a religious character and made it invincible in war and strong in governmental authority and influence. Cicero, in one of his addresses, refers to the religious element of the Roman Empire in these words, quote, "However much we may be disposed to exalt our advantages, it is nevertheless certain that we have been surpassed in population by the Spaniards and physical force by the Gauls. in shrewdness and cunning by Carthage, and in the fine arts by Greece, and in mere native talents by some of our Italian fellow countrymen. But in the single point of attestation to religion, we have excelled all other nations, and it is to the favorable influences of this circumstance upon this character of the people that I count for our success in acquiring the political and military ascendancy we now enjoy throughout the world. This is chapter 2. God in History, Views of Divine Providence by Various Authors, Settlements of the American Continent. Discovered by Columbus, First Sea of Colonization, Preparatory Means of the 16th Century, Religious Acts and Character of Columbus, His Formal Consecration of the Continent to Christ, His Will, Webster's View of Columbus. It says, God in history is the key that solves the problem of human destiny and sheds a true and satisfactory light on the pathway and progress of nations. Quote, in history, end quote, says D. Abugini, if I say correctly, quote, God should be acknowledged and proclaimed. The history of the world should be set as the annals of the government of the sovereign of the universe. God is ever present on that vast theater where successive generations of men and nations struggle. The history of the world, instead of presenting a confused chaos, appears as a majestic temple in which the invisible hand of God himself is at work, and which arises to his glory above the rock of humanity. It was in quote somewhere. I don't see it anywhere, but anyway, it says, quote, shall we not recognize the hand of God in those grand manifestations, those great men, those mighty nations which arise and start as it were from the dust of the earth and communicate a new form and destiny to the human race? Shall we not acknowledge him in those great heroes who sprang from society at appointed epochs, who displayed a strength and an activity beyond the ordinary limits of humanity, and around whom, as around a superior and mysterious power, nations and individuals gladly gather? And do not those great revolutions which hurl kings from their thrones and precipitate the whole nations to the dust, do they not all declare aloud a God in history? Who, if not God? What a startling fact that men brought up amid the elevated ideas of Christianity regard as mere superstition, that divine intervention in human affairs which the very heathen have universally admitted. End quote. The great scholar and Christian philosopher of Germany, the Chevalier Bunsen, says in his, quote, Philosophy of Human History, end quote, says, quote, the noblest nations have ever believed in an immutable moral order of the world, constituted by divine wisdom and regulating the destinies of mankind. The truly philosophical historian must believe that there is an eternal order in the government of that world, to which all might and power are to become and do become subservient, that truth, justice, wisdom, and moderation are sure to triumph, and that when the contrary appears to be the case, the fault lies in our mistaking the middle for the end. There must be a solution for every complication as certainly as a dissonance cannot form the conclusion of a musical composition. In other words, quote, says Bunsen, says, quote, the philosophers who will understand and interpret history must believe that God, not accident, governs the world, end quote. Quote, the principles that govern human affairs, end quote, says Bancroft, says, quote, extending like a path of light from century to century, become the highest demonstration of the superintending providence of God. Universal history does but seek to relate the sum of all God's works of providence. The wheels of providence are not turned about by blind chance, but they are full of eyes around about, that they are all guided by the Spirit of God, end quote. Quote, providence is the light of history and the soul of the world. God is in history, and all history has a unity because God is in it, end quote. So no era in human history is more signally and sublimely marked with the manifest providence and presence of God than that of this discovery and Christian colonization of the North American continent. In 1492, Columbus hailed the opening of the New World with a song of praise and by a solemn act of prayer, consecrated to God. In 1498, 6 years later, Cabot, an English navigator, discovered Newfoundland land and sailed along the coasts of the American continent. Columbus and Cabot were both Roman Catholics and made their discoveries under the auspices of Ferdinand of Spain and Henry VIII of England, who were Roman Catholic sovereigns. It was more than 100 years subsequent that any serious attempts were made to colonize the countries discovered by the Spanish and English navigators. This is, quote, the intervening century, end quote, says the writer, quote, was in many respects the most important period of the world, certainly the most important in modern times. More marked and decided changes affecting science, religion, and liberty occurred in that period than had occurred in centuries before, and all these changes were just such as to determine the Christian character of this country. This is, quote, Columbus came, end quote, says Irving, this is, quote, as a religious man, an admiral of Christ, to find the continent not for its material treasures, but because it held souls which he wished to bring as a trophy to the feet of Christ, end quote. This is Thomas Paine, wrote a little volume entitled, quote, The Age of Reason, end quote. He sent the manuscript to Dr. Franklin and received the following reply. It says, Dear Sir, I have read your manuscript with some attention. By the argument which it contains against a particular providence, though you allow a general providence, you strike at the foundation of all religion. For without the belief of a providence that takes cognizance of guards and guides, and may favor particular persons, there is no motive to worship a deity, to fear its displeasure, or to pray for its protection. I will not enter into any discussion of your principles, though you seem to desire it. At present I shall only give you my opinion that though your reasonings are subtle and may prevail with some readers, you will not succeed so as to change the general sentiments of mankind on that subject, and the consequence of printing this piece will be a great deal of odium drawn upon yourself, mischief to you, and no benefit to others. He that spits against the wind spits in his own face. But were you to succeed, do you imagine any good will be done by it? You yourself may find it easy to live a virtuous life without the assistance afforded by religion. You have a clearer perception of the advantages of virtue and the disadvantages of vice, and possessing a strength of resolution sufficient to enable you to resist common temptations. But think how great a portion of mankind consists of ignorant men and women, and of inexperienced, inconsiderate youth of both sexes, who have need of the motives of religion to restrain them from vice, support their virtue, and retain them in the practice of it, till it becomes habitual, which is the great point for its security, and perhaps you are indebted to her originally, that is, to your religious education, for the habits of virtue upon which you now justly value yourself. You might easily display your excellent talents of reasoning upon less hazardous subjects, and thereby obtain a rank with our most distinguished authors. For among us it is not necessary, as among the Hottentots, that a youth, to be raised into the company of men, should prove his manhood by beating his mother. I would advise you, therefore, not to attempt unchaining the tiger, but to burn this piece before it is seen by any other person, whereby you will save yourself a great deal of mortification from the enemies it may raise against you, and perhaps a good deal of regret and repentance. If men are so wicked with religion, what would they be without it? I intend this letter itself as a proof of my friendship, and therefore add no professions to it, but subscribe simply yours, Benjamin Franklin. A good letter. Basically rebuking Thomas Paine for his, his biblical views and etc. And he wrote in The Age of Reason. So I want to go over. It's a good book. Has a lot of great information. Okay, I wonder where I was. Step out for a little bit. Here, the theory of on this point, upon which the Constitution was formed, was perfect. It secured the recognition of a supreme being and a future retribution, and excluded all tests founded upon distinctions of religion or sex. It found the Bible at large among the people for whom it provided a government, and it left among them the power of the gospel without restraint, free. It left it in the authority and made it the highest interest of the people to select the citizens to office who believed in the Bible and acknowledged the power by conforming their lives to its requirements. More than 60 years of prosperity and domestic peace under the practical working of the system attest the wisdom of the scheme on which it was founded. A fourth fact is its recognition of the Christian Sabbath. Article 1, Section 7 says, quote, if any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays excepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law in like manner as if he had signed it, unless the Congress by their adjournment prevent its return, in which case it shall not be a law. End quote. This is quote, in adopting this provision, end quote, says Dr. Adams, this is quote, it was clearly presumed by the people that the President of the United States would not employ himself in public business or on Sunday, as the people have been accustomed to pay special respect to Sunday from the first settlements of the country. They assumed that the President also would wish to respect that day. They did not think it suitable or becoming to require him by a constitutional provision to respect the day. They assumed that it would be adhered to the customary observance without a requirement. To have enacted a constitutional provision would have left him no choice and would have been placing no confidence in him. They have placed the highest possible confidence in him by assuming, without requiring it, that his conduct in this respect would be according to their wishes. Every man who is capable of being influenced by the higher and more delicate motives of duty cannot fail to perceive that the obligation on the President to respect the observance of Sunday is greatly superior to any which could have been created by a constitutional enactment. The people, in adopting the Constitution, must have been convinced that the public business entrusted to the President would be greater in importance and variety than that which would fall to the share of any functionary employed in a subordinate station. The expectation and confidence that manifested by the people of the United States that their President will respect their Sunday by abstaining from public business on that day must extend a fortiori to all employed in subordinate stations. End quote. The framers, this quote, the framers of the Constitution and those who for many years administered it doubtless had in their eye the first day, the Sabbath of the Christian religion, and they were legislating not for Jews, Mohammedans, infidels, pagans, atheists, but for Christians, and believing the Christian religion the only one calculated to sustain and perpetuate the government about to be formed, they adopted it as the basis of the infant republic. This nation had a religion, and it was the Christian religion. Quote, that Christianity is a religion of this country, and as such is recognized in the whole structure of its government, and lies at the foundation of all of our civil and political institutions. In other words, that Christianity, as really as republicanism is part and parcel of our laws, is evident from the following. End quote. This quote, such was the relation of Christianity into civil government and the several states as they existed prior to the formation of the present federal constitution, and there is no evidence that, in according to said constitution, they surrendered such religion or such relation either to the general or to their own particular governments. End quote. This quote, the colonies from which our present states originated were planted by decidedly Christian people to be Christian communities, and with such views of the relations between civil government and religion as were the universal in Christendom. The experiment of a nation without an established religion had not then been tried, nor did they think of instituting it. Christianity, therefore, was made part of their civil institutions, as well in their miniature branches as in their essential foundations. End quote. This quote, in Massachusetts and other northern colonies, a membership of the church established by law was necessary to citizenship in the Commonwealth. In Virginia and other southern colonies, the Church of England was by law established. End quote. Quote, by and by, when the colonial character had ceased and that states had been assumed, the legal establishment of any one form of Christianity in preference to all other forms of the same was discontinued. In the adoption of the present federal constitution, it was declared among the amendments of that instrument that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This article in the general constitution and the similar alterations in the laws of several states above mentioned, by which the legal precedence of one form of Christianity over another was done away with, are all the ground on which it can be asserted that either our general or state governments have disowned all connections to the Christian religion, as having any more countenance in their legislation than infidelity or Mohammedanism. But is this a warrantable conclusion? Is it not perfectly conceivable that Christianity may be the religion of the people and of the people's government, so far as that her great principles shall be assumed as the basis of their institutions, and the promotion of those principles distinctly continents in their laws and customs, at the same time that no religion is, in the technical sense, established, and no one form of Christianity is distinguished above another. To call religion into connection with the government, so far as to employ ministers and of the gospel as chaplains at the public charge in Congress and other public departments, is decided by long-established practice to be not unconstitutional, and thus it is decided that it was not intended by the article quoted above from the Constitution of the United States to prevent the government of the United States from being connected with religion, with some religion in preference to all others, or to have its institutions based upon the principles of Christianity instead of those of deism or the Quran. This is quote. End quote. This is quote. How unlikely were the several states, and according to the present Constitution, to lay aside all connection with Christianity, and the general institutions of which they gave birth, may be inferred from the consideration that in their own respective legislation a close relation between religion and the government had always subsisted, that though a strong aversion had arisen to the national establishment of any one form of Christianity, none had grown up against a distinct recognition of Christianity itself as the religion of the nation, and that the representatives of the state in the convention that formed the present Constitution were for the most part men of decided Christian principles. End quote. That was definitely a really good book too. Christian